Welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert. And today we're diving into a topic that people love to joke about and love to avoid and somehow love to have very strong opinions on, despite never actually trying it themselves, which is therapy. Because apparently everybody thinks that they are an expert on therapy while simultaneously using their Uber driver, hairstylist, bartender, and best friend as unpaid emotional support specialists, guilty as charged. Today, we are going to unpack some of the biggest misconceptions around therapy and asking why people act like going to therapy means you're one inconvenience away from losing your mind. And we are talking about the reality of actually starting therapy because, spoiler alert, it is nowhere near as dramatic or as sexy as movies make it look. I have still not made out with my therapist. So, we're getting into why people who have never gone to therapy seem to judge it the hardest, how therapy intersects with LGBTQ plus experiences, identity, survival, and emotional growth, how to explain therapy to friends and family who simply do not get it. And we're also discussing something that completely caught me off guard, the fact that my therapist, shout out Brian, basically told me that I was done with therapy with him. I think he might just not want to hang out with me anymore, but whatever. So it's like, what? Excuse me? You're firing me? Are we broken up? Did I graduate? What does this even mean? There's some pros and cons here. And throughout the episode, I'm going to give you some hot air tools and little emotional audits so you can actually use these in your own life, because I don't want this to just be a conversation about therapy. I could talk about therapy till I'm blue in the face, but I want this to be a conversation about understanding yourselves, ourselves a little better, and figuring out whether some things we call personality traits or just personality might actually be baggage, like wearing a cute little outfit. And before we jump in, make sure you are following me on the Hot Air Instagram and TikTok. I've been posting a little bit more if you have not noticed, and you haven't noticed if you're not following me, but follow me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod, and visit my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, where you can shop my merch, submit your listener stories, and topic suggestions, because I love to hear from you. I get a lot of ideas. A lot of the themes come from messages and DMs and conversations I might have in the comment sections. And of course, listener letters are always great to read. I haven't done an episode like that in a while, so maybe I'll do a listener letter episode soon. But grab your emotional support iced coffee. I have mine in my cute hot air mug. Maybe grab your anxiety water bottle, your weighted blanket, and let's hit it. HOTAIR, hot takes therapy, no filter. Say what I mean. HOTAIR, let's be real. You're listening to Hot Air. All right, before we get into part one, the reason I'm doing this episode not only is because my therapist was like, I think we might be done here, or you don't need to come as frequently. The way he worded it kind of confused me. We'll talk about that later in the episode. But this also marks 2 years of me being in therapy. I started with one therapist. I did BetterHelp, and I met with that therapist. I think I did it at first once a week for maybe 2 months-ish. And, therapy is not cheap, and I don't have health insurance. So then I went down to every other week, and then just kind of felt like that therapist was not working for me. So then almost a year later, I started with a new therapist, the one that I currently got rid of me, sort of. And he was so helpful. I can't believe the amount of things we accomplished together, but it's kind of marking my 2-year therapy journey and my 1-year therapy journey that I consider the real therapy journey. That first year was introductory, but the second year was the transformative year. So that's why we're talking about this. And with that, let's get into part one. Therapy is for crazy people, which is the biggest lie we were ever sold. All right, so we're starting with an idea that I genuinely find very fascinating. Who decided that therapy was only for people who are hanging upside down from ceiling fans speaking in tongues like fucking vampires? I'm kind of down with it, but who created that marketing campaign? Somewhere along the way, society collectively decided that going to therapy meant you were broken or unstable, losing your mind, spiraling, or one inconvenience away from wearing a tinfoil hat and screaming at pigeons in the parking lot. Sounds kind of fun to me. Meanwhile, the exact same people saying that they don't need therapy are calling their best friend at 1 a.m, crying over an ex from 6 years ago while stalking that ex's new relationship on Instagram from a fake account that they named like Beach Lover 72. Like, come the fuck on. And listen, no shade, a little bit of shade, some shade, but we have somehow normalized carrying around years of unresolved emotional baggage while making fun of people who decided to unpack it. Think about how insane that actually sounds. Imagine somebody walking around with a broken ankle saying like, "No thanks. I don't believe in doctors or casts. I'm just going to limp forever." You'd be like, "Okay, girl, are you okay?" Yet emotionally, people do this constantly. We just ignore the constant trauma that we need people to help us fix. We live in a culture where getting our teeth cleaned every 6 months is considered responsible, and well, it is. Also, note to self, I'm overdue. Going to the gym is responsible. Drinking enough water, responsible. Doing a 10-step skincare routine while rubbing snail mucus on your face because TikTok told you to. Like, apparently that is responsible. But saying, like, hey, maybe I should check in on my emotional well being and figure out why I'm dating emotionally unavailable men named fucking Chad or Tyler. I don't know a Chad well, I know a Chad or a Tyler. We all know a Chad, but like, I'm not referencing my own experience. But suddenly, that type of need for care becomes controversial. And I think for LGBTQ people specifically, this gets even more layered because so many of us grew up learning survival before we ever learned emotional regulation. Some of us learned very early how to read rooms, monitor people's reactions, watch our behavior, hide certain parts of ourselves, adjust our personalities, shrink ourselves down, or become hyper aware of everyone else's emotions because our own safety sometimes depended on it. Some people call that being observant. Therapists call that hypervigilance. A lot of LGBTQ people became shapeshifters before we even knew who we actually were. We became really good at sensing danger, reading every shift, reading energy shifts, becoming the funny friend, becoming the perfect student, becoming the people pleaser, becoming whatever version of ourselves felt the safest. Sometimes when you're growing up and you are different, you become very good at asking, who do I need to be so everyone accepts me before ever asking, who the fuck am I? Who actually am I? And here's the thing. When you survive long enough in that mode, eventually it stops feeling like survival mode and it starts feeling like your personality. And you still haven't figured that out yet. Suddenly you're saying things like, I'm just independent. Well, are you? Or do you have a hard time trusting people? Me. Or you say, like, I'm easygoing. Well, are you? Or do you just avoid conflict because confrontation makes you uncomfortable? Or you say, like, I'm just the funny one. Are you? Or did humor become an armor? Also me. And I oop. Isn't that the saying? And I oop. I'm old. I don't know. But like, sorry. I hate when I attack myself accidentally. But that is so on the nose. That's the thing that therapy starts doing. Therapy starts taking these things that you thought were personality traits and starts asking whether they might actually be coping mechanisms. And like, listen, nobody likes that in the beginning because it's uncomfortable. We love self-awareness until self-awareness starts becoming aware of us. I think another reason that therapy gets judged so much is because people hear the word and immediately think that something dramatic has happened. They think therapy is only for trauma or divorce, depression, crisis, or like your life completely falling apart. But therapy can also be for like, why do I feel guilty every time I say no? Therapy can be for why do I panic when somebody gets too close to me? Therapy can be why do I feel like I have to earn love? Therapy can literally be like, why do I feel anxious for no reason at Sunday at 4 p.m.? Like, why? There's no right or wrong question to bring to therapy. And here's a little hot air tool I want you to do, a little emotional audit with me, okay? I want you to ask yourself these questions. Do I constantly feel responsible for other people's emotions? Do I apologize excessively? Do I feel guilty resting? Do I struggle receiving compliments? Do I keep ending up in the same situations with different people? Do I constantly tell myself this is just how I am? Because if you answered yes to multiple things, or even one, congratulations, you may not be broken. You may just be human. We've all experienced those in one way or another. And that's another thing I want to scream from the rooftops because therapy isn't about fixing broken people. Therapy is about understanding yourself, and that is it. Just understanding how you function. I think people hear therapy and immediately hear there's something wrong with me. But I hear therapy and I think, oh, cool. Somebody handed me the instruction manual I should have gotten 20 years ago, right? It would have been great if I was 12 and got the instruction manual. Actually, why not make it 37 years ago? Especially in the queer community where so many of us spent years trying to understand ourselves through everybody else's expectations. Maybe you had to come out. Maybe you felt rejected. Maybe you felt invisible. Maybe you grew up religious. Maybe you spent years questioning whether you were too much or not enough or too feminine or too masculine, too loud, too quiet, too gay, whatever the fuck it even was. Whatever the hell any of that even means, right? That stuff doesn't just disappear because you get older. It would be great if it did. It doesn't. People think that healing means forgetting that things happened, and it doesn't. Healing means understanding why things affected you and learning how to carry them differently. Because here is the reality: everyone has stuff. The difference is that some people unpack it and some people drag it behind them for 40 years, call it a personality trait, and they're dragging it behind them in a suitcase that has broken fucking wheels, okay? I don't know about you, but dragging around that emotional baggage in a broken suitcase sounds fucking exhausting. I would rather unpack it, hang it up or fold it, and put it away. Part 2. Therapy isn't what movies told us it was. I genuinely think that movies and television completely ruined my expectations of what therapy was supposed to be. Growing up, therapy always looked incredibly dramatic, right? Like somebody would walk into a room looking emotionally destroyed, throw themselves onto like a leather couch, stare at the ceiling, and some perfectly dressed therapist with tiny glasses would tilt their head and go, "And how does that make you feel? Tell me, what are you feeling?" And then suddenly, inspirational music would start playing. And by the end of the scene, they'd have like some massive breakthrough where everything made sense. They'd walk out a completely transformed person, smiling into the sunshine like they had just unlocked the meaning of life. Meanwhile, nobody tells you that actual therapy is significantly less cinematic and significantly more like assembling IKEA furniture for your emotions. You walk in thinking you're just putting together like a cute little side table, and then suddenly there are 700 pieces scattered across the floor. The instructions don't make sense. You're missing screws, and at some point you're sitting there wondering how your relationship anxiety somehow became connected to something that happened to you when you were 9 years old. Wow. IKEA is no fun. The first reality check that nobody prepares you for is that starting therapy is extremely awkward. Like very, very awkward. Think about it. You are walking into a room with a complete stranger, and immediately they are asking questions that would usually almost absolutely terrify somebody on a first date. Within the first few minutes, they're asking things like, "Tell me about your relationship with your parents." And you're sitting there and you're thinking like, "Excuse me? What? Like, we haven't even built enough trust for appetizers yet. Come on." Then they start asking things like, how do you respond to conflict? And you're like, honestly, kind of poorly. Or maybe I don't even know. Next question. Then they ask about your childhood. And suddenly you're trying to summarize like 20 or 30 years of entire existence into one little hour. You're mentally fast forwarding through your life. Like, okay, here's elementary school, here's family stuff, here's heartbreak, here's high school, here's college, here's trauma, here's that weird thing that happened in 7th grade that still randomly appears in my head while I am brushing my teeth at 11 o'clock at night for absolutely no fucking reason. And halfway through, you realize that therapy isn't actually a place where you're simply telling stories. Therapy is a place where someone starts looking for patterns. And this is where things start getting a little offensive because therapy has this very annoying habit of revealing that the thing you thought was the problem is usually not actually the problem. Like you walk in convinced that you've identified the issue, you're feeling confident, you are organized, you are prepared. You're like, okay, I know exactly why I'm here. I keep dating emotionally unavailable men. That's the problem. It's because ABC. Great, we solved it. Like, fantastic work, everyone. Let's just call it a day, go home. Then somehow, 4 sessions later, you're discussing fear of abandonment, childhood validation, people-pleasing tendencies, attachment styles, and self-worth. And you're sitting there thinking like, hold on a second. I came in because Chad, we're bringing it back to Chad wouldn't text me back. Why are we discussing my entire emotional development. Therapy really has a way of humbling you because humans love that simple explanation. We love saying things like, I just have trust issues, or I just overthink, or I'm just independent. But therapy starts asking questions underneath the questions. It starts asking why. Why do we have trust issues? Why do you avoid relationships? Why do you constantly need reassurance? Why do you apologize for things that are not your fault? Why do you struggle asking for help? And eventually, you start realizing that you have spent your whole entire life treating symptoms without understanding the cause. I think that this can become especially powerful for LGBTQ people because many of us become experts in performance before we ever become experts in authenticity. A lot of us grew up learning how to monitor ourselves constantly. Maybe you lowered your voice around certain people. Been there, done that. Maybe you hid your crushes. Maybe you became the funny friend because making people laugh felt safer than letting people actually get to know you. Okay, maybe you became overly agreeable because rejection felt terrifying. Maybe you learned to read rooms, shift your personality depending on who was in that room. Things most queer people can relate to. And then after years or decades of doing that, you get so fucking good at it, right? So good that you eventually stop realizing that you're doing it at all. It is second nature, it is a pattern, it is a habit. Then therapy comes along and basically says, okay, cool, let's just remove everything, remove that performance, put it in the trash. Let's find out who you actually are. And your brain immediately goes like, remove what performance? What are you talking about? I know who I am. And that usually is not the case because sometimes queer people spend so much time adapting and surviving that we lose complete sight of where survival ends and authenticity begins. And you become so used to asking, how do I make everyone else comfortable, that you stop asking yourself, what actually makes me comfortable? And that kind of goes for everyone, not just queer people, but this is a gay ass podcast. So we're bringing it back to where it belongs. Okay. I think a lot of people in our community have experienced this weird moment after coming out where you suddenly realize there are pieces of yourself you've never actually met before, because coming out isn't just telling people that you're gay or bi or trans or queer or wherever. Sometimes coming out is also meeting yourself for the very, very first time. And you start asking questions like, what music do I actually like? What kind of relationship do I actually want? What parts of my personality are truly me? What parts were survival mechanism? What parts were fear? What parts existed because I thought I had to earn love and acceptance? And the straights can ask themselves those questions too. Okay. Those questions can feel overwhelming because for some people, nobody has ever asked themselves that question or any of those questions before. It can feel like a lot. And here is another hot air tool. I want listeners to grab their phones, grab your notes app, unless you're driving, or write this down on a piece of paper. Write this down. Who am I when I am not performing for approval? Then underneath it, maybe write 5 answers, right? Not who you are at work, not who you are in relationships, not who you are for family, social media, friends, or people you want validation from. Just you. Who are you when you're not performing? Like, I would say I'm a lot weirder and goofier when I'm not performing, when I'm just alone in my own space. I would say I'm more judgmental towards myself when I'm not performing. Probably a lot more sensitive when I'm not performing. You get the idea. That's kind of a vulnerable little tool. And I could only come up with 3 because we've got a lot more to talk about. So, who are you when you are not performing for approval? And therapy isn't about creating some brand new version of yourself. That is a very big misconception. Honestly, I feel more like myself than I ever have. Therapy isn't turning you into somebody else. Therapy is usually just removing all the noise until you can hear yourself again. And maybe that's why starting therapy feels uncomfortable sometimes, because before things become organized, they usually become very, very messy. You're pulling everything out of the closet before you can clean it. For a while, you're sitting there surrounded by all of these boxes, baggage, old stories, coping mechanisms, like old ways of thinking. And you're like, this is a fucking disaster. What a fucking mess. And maybe it's not a disaster at all, though, right? Maybe it's simply the first time you've actually turned the lights on and actually looked around. So therapy is not cinematic. You're not going to fall in love with your therapist, highly unlikely. What therapy is a commitment. It is a slow process, And it is a fucking fantastic way to figure out who you actually are and to finally be comfortable in your own skin. Part 3, why people who've never been to therapy judge it so hard. And if you're somebody listening who has been to therapy and you've spoken to a friend, a family member who has not been to therapy, a lot of them have sly little comments, little sneaky jokes, things here and there like, ugh, you're talking about therapy again. Like when I told somebody about my new boyfriend who also goes to therapy, we bonded. The person asked me, like, what do you guys have in common? I was going through the laundry list of all the gazillion things that we have in common. And one of them was like, we both been to therapy. We talk about our therapy sessions. And the person that I was talking to kind of like rolled their eyes and was like, "Oh well, you can bond over therapy," because they have never been to therapy, right? And I have, and I'm a very big supporter of going to therapy. I tell everyone to go to therapy. Like, there's people that just don't get it, which is also part of the reason that I'm doing this episode, and that's fine. Everyone is on their own journey, but you know what I mean. People will make little comments because therapy instantly makes them uncomfortable, right? So, why do people judge it so hard? This is something else that I find very interesting and fascinating, and honestly, something I can't quite put my finger on, but I have noticed it over and over again. You know, the people who are most anti therapy, the people who immediately roll their eyes and say, like, therapy's stupid, or I don't need somebody to tell me how to live my life, or like, my personal favorite is, well, I turned out fine, everything's fine. Somehow, also tend to be the same people unloading 27 years of unresolved emotional baggage and damage into conversations all the fucking time. Like suddenly you're at brunch discussing pancakes and somehow you've learned about their ex-wife, their difficult relationship with their father, a betrayal that happened in like 2008, and a coworker named Linda that they're still angry at from like 1960 for reasons that nobody fully understands. That, my dears, is why you need therapy. And listen, I hold on. Reel it in. I say this with love because we all know these people. We absolutely all know these people. We may have even been these people in certain areas of our lives, but I started realizing that a lot of the people aren't actually judging therapy itself. They are judging what they think that therapy represents. When people hear therapy, they often don't hear self-awareness or growth or learning tools. They hear like all they hear is something is wrong with me. And that is a very different thing, a completely different thing to hear. Think about how many times these people say things like, I don't need therapy, with this weird sense of pride attached to it. Like they just announced they climbed Mount Everest with no oxygen tank. Like it's almost said like a badge of honor. I don't need therapy. Like somehow struggling through everything completely alone is proof of strength. Meanwhile, imagine applying that logic to literally anything else in life. Okay. Imagine somebody saying, I don't need a personal trainer, while lifting weights with terrible form, dislocating a shoulder, and hurting your back every 3 weeks. Imagine somebody saying, I don't need a dentist, while chewing exclusively on the left side of their mouth because 3 teeth are hanging on by a prayer on the right side. Like we would look at them and be like, bestie, that's not resilience. That is avoidance. You need a trainer and you need a dentist. Okay. I can smell you from here. I think underneath a lot of judgment around therapy, of course, is the fear. Therapy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is uncomfortable. Therapy asks you to sit in front of somebody and say things out loud that maybe you spent years trying to not even think about. You've been trying to keep it out of your mind, and people hate that. Like we love self-improvement until self-improvement starts asking us difficult questions. And I want to be very clear here. There are people that have a hell of a lot more trauma than I do. Like things that I can't even begin to wrap my head around. And I don't want to because I am blessed that I haven't experienced those things in my life. So I can't imagine how challenging that would be to go into a therapist's office and relive some of that trauma. And everyone is on their own path. So I just don't want this to be like, oh, Josh is telling somebody who was molested when they were 9 that they need to just go into a therapist and tell them all about it. Like, that's not what I'm saying. So again, we love self-improvement until self-improvement starts asking us very difficult questions. And once you start becoming aware of your patterns, suddenly you can't unknow them anymore. Suddenly you notice that every relationship follows the same cycle. You notice that you apologize for existing. You notice that every time somebody gets close to you, you pull away, and suddenly you realize your sense of self-worth depends entirely on external validation. And once you see it, you cannot unsee that shit anymore. For some people, it's easier to not look at it at all, which is another reason people don't go to therapy. And honestly, I kind of get it. And I think this gets even more complicated within the queer community and within queer experiences, because many of us grew up learning very quickly that being different came with consequences. Depending on your family or your religion, culture, school environments, or communities, like a lot of LGBTQ people learned that vulnerability did not always feel safe. Maybe showing emotion got you mocked. Maybe asking for help felt very weak. Maybe expressing parts of yourself felt dangerous. Maybe you learned that survival meant keeping things inside. We got mocked for being flamboyant or trying to come out. Of course, we're going to go back into our shell. And when you've spent years building emotional armor, taking that armor off can feel absolutely terrifying. So, so scary. And that's why many queer people become experts at finding unofficial therapists everywhere. We create support systems because we often had to. We trauma bond in bathrooms at clubs. We become best friends with someone after one conversation because suddenly you're sharing life stories in a corner booth somewhere at some dingy dive bar at 3 a.m. We sit in cars at midnight talking for 3 hours. We create chosen family because chosen family has always been one of our superpowers and kind of our chosen therapy. But here is where things get a little funny, because sometimes those friendships become emotional support centers operating 24 hours a day with absolutely no training, no boundaries, no business hours. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone knows. We create this support system. We go to our friends or our close family for like this immediate gratification. But these people aren't looking for our patterns. They aren't looking to heal us. They're looking to vent with us because they are our besties. But there's no training there. We all have that friend who calls and starts with like, okay, hey, quick question. Or, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. And suddenly 48 minutes later, you somehow become responsible for solving their relationship or career, family crisis, like all before dinner time, maybe even before breakfast sometimes. And I love chosen family. I love my people. I think chosen family fucking saves us. Seriously, I genuinely do. But friends and therapists have very different jobs, and learning the difference is important, right? Friends say, you're amazing, screw them, right? That's it. Therapists say, okay, but let's unpack why you keep choosing people who treat you badly. Vast difference there. Like I've always said, when some of my girlfriends would go through a breakup and people, other people in the group would just be like, oh, fuck that guy. He's a fucking loser. I would always say, okay, that's not helpful because A, she liked him. B, why are we choosing people that are shitty people? And we keep doing the same thing over and over. So maybe that's why I'm not really friends with straight women anymore, because I do act more like a therapist as opposed to someone who is just their chosen family who's just gonna be like, fuck that dude, moving on. Let's have a shot. Like, that's not how I roll. I mean, I will say, fuck that dude. Let's unpack this, talk about it. Then I'll say, fuck that bitch again, and then let's have a shot. There's somewhere in between. So friends, some of them bring wine when you need it, right? They bring wine over and pizza. Therapists, they bring accountability. Friends might validate every feeling you have simply because they love you, right? Which is great. Therapists might lovingly call you the fuck out. And let's be very honest, nobody enjoys being called out at first. I kind of do, but I'm an odd one. Not many people do. We all want healing until healing starts reading us for filth. A lot of people assume that therapy means somebody sitting there judging them, but a good therapist is not sitting there going like, wow, you're a mess. And it might feel that way sometimes. Some of them might be as well, but generally they are also trying to sort through your patterns. They're usually sitting there connecting the dots, noticing the patterns that you cannot see because you're standing inside of the picture. They are solving a puzzle. You are part of the puzzle. And that is important because sometimes we become so used to our own behaviors that we stop recognizing them entirely. Dysfunction just feels normal when you've lived inside it long enough. So let's get to another little tool, like the next time that you hear yourself judging something, okay? Because this section was about judgment, or even judging someone else's choices, or judging whether or not they go to therapy maybe. I want you to ask a question. Am I criticizing this because I genuinely disagree with it or because it makes me uncomfortable? Because sometimes judgment is just fear wearing a fake mustache. And sometimes we're not rejecting something because it is bad. Sometimes we're rejecting something because deep down we are afraid that it might reveal something about us. And that is why therapy gets judged so hard by people who have never tried it, because it isn't because they think that therapy is ridiculous. It's because opening emotional boxes that you have kept sealed for years feels terrifying. Like, imagine telling your parents who are in their 60s, right? Like, anybody listening, your parents or your aunts or your uncles, that they should try therapy and they're 65. Like, that's got to be scary. If you've spent your whole life pretending that you're fine, eventually pretending starts feeling safer than even looking at honesty, right? But safer and healthier are not always the same thing. So, those people that are judging therapy, that say they don't need it, that say that they are perfect, they're not judging it because they think it's stupid. They're judging it because it's scary. Part 4. My therapist said that I was done. This is the part I've been waiting for. Like, what? I'm sorry. Okay, I need everyone listening to understand that I had absolutely no idea that this was really even a thing. Like, zero. I thought therapy just like went on forever. You just went less and less and less. Like, not one clue. In my mind, therapy was an emotional gym membership. Okay, I assumed you signed up, showed up every week, and then maybe once a month forever, cried a little bit, unpacked your issues, occasionally had breakthroughs, and that was just your life now. This was something that was a pattern that was going to continue forever. I thought once you started therapy, you were in some sort of lifelong subscription service like Netflix, but for feelings, but they also keep increasing the price every month. So imagine my confusion when my therapist, Brian, essentially looked at me the other day, maybe 2 weeks ago, and said, in a much more professional therapist way, but like, I think you've gotten what you need from me. And I was like, excuse me? Actually, okay. What he actually said was, do you feel like you need to keep coming to therapy? Because I feel like we accomplished the goal that we set out to accomplish. I said, I don't know. I've never thought about that. Last week, I had a lot of anxiety about something. And I was like, oh, I wish I would have had a session with Brian. And I didn't. I had it the week later. So I just tried to sort through it on my own that week. And he was like, that is exactly the point of therapy. You didn't need me then. You wanted to come to therapy, but you have the tools that you were able to manage it yourself, and you could wait a week. And again, my trauma and the things that I talk about in therapy are vastly different than a lot of people. So it's not like my world was crumbling around me. I was just having a little bit of anxiety around certain things. And I worked through it on my own. And he had a very good point. I was like, sweet, I have the tools. And then he said something along the lines of, I don't like to keep clients forever. I want to work with them on a goal. And when they accomplish that goal, maybe we start going down in sessions, in frequency of sessions. And I used to go to Brian once a week. And that was a whole year of once a week. That's a lot, a lot of money. And 50 whatever sessions. How many weeks are there in a year? 52 or something? So 52 sessions, 52 hours. In the grand scheme of life, that's not a lot. That's like a little more than a work week. And then we started going down to once a month. So it was February, March, April, and May that we did once a month. So we did 4 sessions that happened every 30 days. And I had less and less to bring to the table. And valid. The more I look around at my life, the more calm it feels, the more peaceful it feels, the more positive opportunities I have coming my way, the more I'm less anxious, the more I'm less irritable, the more I'm able to communicate my feelings effectively, the more I feel like I have a good support system. So, like, yeah, I kind of agree with him. A lot of stuff is working really well, but I also was like, but what happens when I need you? What are we going to do here? So, needless to say, I was like a little thrown off. Like, I remember having this moment internally where my brain, like, basically went like, "Okay, hold on, are you breaking up with me? Like, have I been fired? Did I fail at therapy somehow? Was there a final exam I didn't know about? Did I miss the homework?" Like, suddenly, I was spiraling a little bit into all of these, like, crazy, ridiculous thoughts. I was like, "Wait a minute. Are you saying I'm fixed? Like, am I healed? Because I know myself, and I don't know if I'd go throwing around the words fixed, but I did say to him, I'm gonna text everyone and tell them I'm perfectly healed and sane. I'm ready. Okay. I was laughing, obviously, because I realized that I genuinely thought therapy was supposed to continue forever. Some it does. I'm 100% sure I will keep going. I thought success in therapy meant like staying in therapy indefinitely, but Brian explained it completely differently and changed kind of how I thought about it. Like, therapy isn't designed to make you dependent on therapy. Okay. Say it again. Therapy is not designed to make you dependent on therapy. A good therapist is not trying to create a customer for life. They are not trying to become your emotional life support system where every decision, every feeling, and every challenge requires you to run back for instructions. The goal is quite the opposite. The goal is for you to learn tools, develop awareness, recognize patterns, build emotional skills, and eventually trust yourself enough to drive without needing someone sitting in the passenger seat all of the time. And honestly, I think this idea surprises a lot of people, including myself, because society sometimes treats emotional growth like there's only two settings. You are either struggling or you are healed. You're either broken or you are fixed. You're either doing bad or you're doing amazing. And that is not how it works at all. And when you start to wrap your head around that as well, that's going to change the way you look at things. Because I was like, I'm never going to be healed. I'm never going to be perfect. I'm never going to be just this healed perfect version of myself, but that doesn't exist. All of those triggers are still going to live somewhere inside of us. My frustration when I'm driving in traffic is still going to be there, but the way I used to flip out versus how I flip out now, a lot better. Like, emotional growth is much more like learning how to exercise than reaching some magical finish line. You do not wake up one day and suddenly go like, "Ugh, amazing. I've completed health. Never eating vegetables again." No, you learn habits, you learn awareness, you learn maintenance. Therapy works very similarly. You learn how to notice your thoughts before they become spirals. You learn how to regulate emotions before they become explosions. You learn how to identify unhealthy patterns before they become another season of like, why is this happening to me again? And let's be honest, we all have reoccurring episodes. Recurring episodes. I always say reoccurring, but it's recurring episodes, okay? I think this is especially interesting within the queer community because many of us spend years doing that surviving, that adapting, try to figure ourselves out. We navigate coming out, family relationships, rejection, identity, dating, community, body image, loneliness, religion, or like just trying to exist in environments where like you didn't always feel understood. That's a fucking lot. You learn survival skills, but survival skills aren't always the same as thriving skills. For example, okay, maybe being hyper independent kept you safe at one point. I am very independent. I do everything on my own. Maybe keeping walls up protected you. Yes. Maybe avoiding difficult conversations prevented rejection. Okay. Maybe constantly reading everyone else's emotions helped you anticipate danger. I do that all the time. Those things may have served a purpose once at one point in time in your life. Therapy starts asking a different question. Is the thing that protected you before still helping you now? So, was me having walls up protecting me? Was that protecting me then? Sure. But is it protecting me now? No, it's preventing me from having the types of relationships that I want. Sometimes we're carrying around these tools that we no longer need. I no longer needed that wall because I am confident, because I found who I am, because I feel good in my skin. But that wall doesn't just go away. It's a habit from a gazillion years, from 35 probably years of protecting myself, right? But if I want true, authentic relationships and I want a romantic partner that gets me and I want to be able to communicate effectively with my family and my friends, that wall has to come down. I don't need it anymore. So it was protecting me, but now it is preventing me. It's like if you show up to dinner wearing a bicycle helmet because one time you fell off a bike in 4th grade. Like, that doesn't make sense. At some point, someone gently has to go like, "Okay, listen, I understand why you brought that bike helmet with you to dinner, but I don't think you need it anymore." Like that. Oh, that's a hilarious analogy. I'm going to start wearing bike helmets everywhere. But that's what Brian, my therapist, helped me understand. He wasn't saying that I had become some enlightened emotional wizard floating above life's problems while meditating on a mountaintop somewhere, although that sounds gorge. He wasn't saying that I would never feel anxious again. He wouldn't say I would never overthink, that I'd never struggle, never have moments where I needed support. He was simply saying that I had built enough awareness and enough tools to start recognizing things on my own. And sometimes you also need a therapist to tell you that, because I wouldn't have realized. I would have just kept going every month, even though I didn't really have much to talk about anymore. Like, there is a big difference. So here is another hot air tool I want people listening to think about, because this actually hit me very hard after that conversation I had with him. I want you to ask yourself, what emotional tools do I have now that I did not have 5 years ago? Or maybe even 2 years ago? Maybe now you set boundaries. Maybe you communicate better. Maybe you apologize less just for existing. Maybe you recognize red flags faster. Maybe you leave situations sooner. Maybe you understand your triggers. Maybe you know when you need to rest instead of pushing through the burnout. Just write down like 3, 4, 5 things, tools you have now that you maybe didn't before. Growth can be difficult to see while you're standing inside of it. It's hard to see all of those tools. So step outside for a hot second and take a look at yourself like you would be a therapist. What have you learned? What tools do you have now? Sometimes we're so focused on where we're still struggling that we forget to notice how far we've actually come. And here's the thing that I really want people to understand, because I think this matters a lot. Graduating therapy doesn't mean you're healed forever. It doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It doesn't mean you never go back. It doesn't mean that things are not going to come up in the future where you're like, I could use a little therapy re-up. People return to therapy all of the time. I will. I'm sure I will. Life changes. Relationships happen and relationships change. Grief happens. Stress happens. New challenges happen. You can go back whenever you want to. Therapy is not some one-time destination where you arrive and collect a trophy. It is simply another tool. And sometimes you need that tool more often, and sometimes you need that tool less often. Maybe the biggest thing that I learned from that whole experience was realizing that growth is not about needing less support. Growth is knowing what support you need and trusting yourself to ask for it. Sometimes you need more and sometimes you need less. Like, for the longest time, I believe that strength meant like handling everything alone, right? Being very independent, having that guard up, being massive lone wolf. Now I starting to feel that strength might actually be knowing when you don't have to do everything alone, when you can ask people for help, when you don't have to have your guard up. So therapy taught me that. My therapist taught me that. He gave me so many tools. I guess I'm going to take a little break from therapy and go back as needed. I think I'm going to do quarterly check-ins. And I mean, I guess we'll probably revisit this conversation as time progresses. Feels a little weird to be like, quote unquote, done with therapy. But if I learned anything from anything I just said, you're never done, but you don't have to go all the time. I got my tools. I'm not healed. I am just healing. Right? Right. But I am going to go to that mountaintop and like get really zen and like float in the sky like a weird wizard. So that sounds cute. Okay, now we're going to get to some good shit, okay? Part 5. How to explain therapy to friends and family who don't get it. Now, let's talk about one of the most frustrating experiences on earth, and that is trying to explain therapy to people who have already decided what therapy is before you even opened your mouth. Because if you've gone to therapy, there's a very good chance that you've experienced some version of this conversation. You tell somebody that you're going to therapy, and suddenly they look at you like you just announced that you're leaving society and joining a cult on a remote mountain where everyone wears beige and linen and drinks mushroom tea. And honestly, a lot of these like funny little analogies actually sound quite nice. Then come the comments. Like, we know the comments. Why do you need therapy? Just think positive. Everybody has problems. You're overthinking things. Back in the day, we didn't need therapy. And my favorite one, just move on. And by my favorite one, my least favorite one, like, just move on. Okay, Brenda. Like, wow, incredible. revolutionary, groundbreaking medical discovery alert. Like, hold on while I call every mental health professional in existence and let them know the solution was apparently simply stop feeling things and move on. Like, we did it, everyone. We solved emotions. Brenda cured us. Like, I don't even think that most people say these things because they're trying to be cruel. I really don't. I think a lot of people are trying to help with the emotional tools they personally have available, which the problem is they don't have a lot of emotional tools. People give advice based on what made them survive instead of what helps you heal. There's a difference. Brenda might have been able to just move on because she has this wall up and puts her emotions in a little box and never revisits them again until 20 years down the road when she has a massive breakdown, Brenda. But we don't want that, okay? And a lot of these generations, I think Brenda's probably about 65 years old now. Brenda is a hypothetical human, but she's in a different generation, right? These previous generations, survival looked different. The goal wasn't emotional awareness. The goal was paying bills, getting through difficult situations, keeping food on the table, pushing forward no matter what. Feelings often became secondary, if not tertiary, because the demand was survival. So many people learn things like don't talk about your problems, keep your head down, work harder, stop complaining, move on. And when you have spent 40 plus years operating that way, therapy can sound very strange. It can sound like overanalyzing things, it can sound unnecessary, it can sound self indulgent. But here's the thing: surviving and thriving, again, they are not the same thing. Surviving says, like, I got through it. I got through it. I got through it. Like, ugh. Healing and thriving says, I understand how it affected me. Those are two completely different conversations. I would rather understand it than just get through it. And queer people especially understand this because many of us have had moments where people around us simply didn't understand our experience, right? Maybe you came out and somebody said, like, I don't understand why it matters. Maybe someone told you not to make it your whole personality. Maybe someone minimized fears you had about acceptance and dating and safety, family, or identity. People have said all kinds of things to me. Well, you're not just a gay man. You're more than being just gay. And I'm like, oh, don't get me started, honey. And what people sometimes don't realize is that when your experience has been minimized repeatedly, you start minimizing yourself. And I am gay. That is who I am. I'm a gay man. Sure, I'm a gay man that is funny, that is creative, that is confident, that is a bad bitch. I'm a baddie. I'm a hot air baddie. But like, I'm a gay man, just like you are a straight woman. Like, get it together. You filing that away for a different episode. That could be a very interesting conversation. But you start telling yourself things like that, like you're being dramatic or you shouldn't be upset or other people have it worse. Like, maybe like you just start minimizing these things. Maybe I just need to get over it. Meanwhile, you're carrying around experiences that genuinely shaped the way that you see yourself and the world. And I think that is why therapy can be so fucking powerful for queer people. For the first time, a lot of the time, somebody is sitting across from you saying, like, that makes sense. And they're not judging you and they get it. And they don't say, like, you're overreacting. They're an ally. They're on your page. They're not saying, like, you're gonna be fine. They're giving you tools. They're working through it. They're not telling you to stop thinking about it. They're helping you think about it more and in a healthier way. A lot of the times they just say, like, that makes sense and I get it. Like, a lot of people don't understand how healing just that can be. Like, some people spend years and years waiting to hear that. I was one of those people. I've talked about this before on the pod, how certain people I was related to did not like what I said in the first episode of Hot Air about allyship. Some of these people I do not still to this day have not spoken to. And that's life, right? Like that's fine. And I honestly feel so good. Like I feel like I've moved so far beyond that now. But when I went to therapy first, that was the reason. I thought, like, maybe I shouldn't have said that stuff. Maybe what I said was too harsh. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they were right to speak to me so terribly as they did after the episode came out. And my therapist, while some people might say that they were, what's that word? When you enable, I was going to say when you're helping a drug addict. Some might say that therapists enable you, right? And like some people have even alluded to my therapist enabling me. And the difference is that my therapist is also gay. He gets where I am coming from. He validated a lot of those feelings I was having around that specific issue, that specific concern with specific family members, because my guilt came in, my questioning whether I was right or wrong, whether I should have spoken my mind, whether I should have put any of the things that I speak about on the podcast out there. And one of the most validating, healing things is for someone to just say, like, I hear you. I get it. That makes sense. It's quite simple. And with that being said, not everybody has to understand your healing process. The people that might be saying, like, your therapist is enabling you, they don't have to get it. Like, who the fuck cares? If you're forging ahead and you like your therapist, super. I think sometimes we accidentally start treating our self improvement like it is a group project where everybody needs to approve of it. We start over explaining ourselves like way too much. We start defending ourselves, defending why we're going to therapy, and we start trying to like convince people. Like we say things that are unnecessary, like, well, I go because, or no, but my therapist said, or actually therapy helps with blah, 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 right? Like we're suddenly giving a TED talk about therapy. And honestly, that's kind of annoying and nobody requested it. I catch myself doing it and I cut myself off pretty quickly. Like you don't owe an explanation to everyone or anyone. You do you, boo. Like you really don't. If someone genuinely wants to understand, I found that very simple explanations work better than turning into like a walking psychology textbook, and let those people ask questions instead of saying like, I'm processing emotional patterns related to interpersonal attachment dynamics. Like, huh? Maybe just say like, I'm learning tools to understand myself better. It's very simple. And again, if someone wants to know, they should be asking questions, right? Instead of saying like, I'm working on cognitive restructuring techniques. Maybe say like, I'm learning healthier ways to respond to things. Like keep it simple. What is it? KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Simple is the way. Like therapy is not about fixing something that is broken. You're not bringing a damaged appliance into a repair shop. You are simply learning skills. People take skating lessons, dance lessons, drawing lessons, soccer lessons. They learn skills. You're learning skills there too. We learn skills everywhere in life when we're driving, how to cook, how to use technology. Like it's all a tool. Nobody just magically knows how to communicate or set boundaries or process emotions or regulate your anxiety or navigate relationships or even develop self-worth. So why do we act like emotional skills should come pre-installed? Because your fucking soccer skills and your slam dunks and basketball skills are not pre-installed either. Now, I have another hot air tool for you, and this one is important. The next time that somebody questions something you are doing for your own growth, ask yourself, am I explaining myself because I want connection or because I want permission? Because those two things are different. Connection says, I'd love for you to understand me. And permission says, please approve of me. And again, you don't need approval from anyone when you are getting life skills. You don't need permission to take care of yourself. You don't need permission to grow, and you don't need permission to heal. At the end of the day, not everyone is going to understand choices that require self-awareness, especially if they have not taken that journey themselves. But your healing was never supposed to make everyone else comfortable. It was supposed to make you healthier. Part 6, signs you might actually need therapy. Now, before anybody starts texting me and saying like, Josh, are you diagnosing me through a podcast right now? Like, no, absolutely not, because I am not a doctor. I am not sitting here in a lab coat with a clipboard handing out emotional prescriptions, okay? This is not me saying that everybody needs to immediately sprint to therapy and book an appointment before this episode ends, and it is ending soon. But I do think that sometimes people imagine needing therapy means that your entire life has to be falling apart. Like, people think there has to be some dramatic movie moment where you're standing in the rain outside of a building while sad music is, I don't know, playing from some mysterious speaker somewhere. Your mascara is running, even though you somehow are not even wearing any mascara. People wait for some giant flashing sign that says, like, attention, your mental health is now bad enough to qualify to fix it in therapy. Like, no, life does not usually work like that. Most of the time, emotional struggles don't show up wearing a giant name tag and introducing themselves, right? They show up quietly, they show up disguised as habits and behaviors, reactions and patterns that become so normal that eventually you stop questioning them altogether. Like maybe you consistently tell yourself you're just stressed, but you've had stomach pain every Sunday for 3 years. Maybe you're just tired, but you're emotionally exhausted all the time. Maybe you say that you're just independent, but asking for help feels physically uncomfortable. Maybe you're just laid back, but in reality, you avoid conflict so aggressively that you would rather move to another country than tell somebody that they hurt your feelings. Like, listen, I say that all with love. Okay. I think all of us have little things that we explain away. I'm just tired. I'm just stressed. I'm just a lone wolf. Like, we become incredible storytellers when it comes to ourselves. We might say, I don't have trust issues, but you check their location, their Instagram following, their Spotify activity, and the weather forecast in their city because they took 2 hours to answer your text. I have not done that, okay? I'm just saying. Well, once upon a time, long time ago, I would go to that degree. Or like you might say, I'm not anxious, but your brain just created 42 fake scenarios during a 3-minute period of silence. Or you might say, I'm fine. Or have you just become really good at functioning while overwhelmed? Because functioning and feeling okay are not always the same thing. Now, again, bringing it back to my gaze, we become especially good at functioning. A lot of us learned very early how to keep going no matter what. Maybe when it was dealing with rejection or feeling isolated, or when you hid parts of yourselves or struggled with body image, you felt like you had to earn acceptance, or maybe you spent years trying to fit into spaces where you never fully felt like you belonged or even wanted to be. And when you spend those years surviving things, eventually you can become very, very good at carrying heavy things with you. It's so good that you forget these things are even heavy, that they're weighing you down, and you just keep carrying them because that's what you've always done. And that goes for everyone, straights included, okay? But I do think that's why LGBTQ people hit this weird moment in adulthood where they suddenly think like, wait a minute, why am I reacting like this? Like maybe somebody gives you a compliment and you don't believe them. Maybe somebody gets close to you and you panic. That happens a lot with the gays. Maybe somebody loves you consistently and instead of feeling safe, it feels unfamiliar. I'm pointing at myself right now because sometimes what we call personality is actually adaptation. And adaptation isn't bad. Adaptation kept a lot of us safe, but eventually you have to ask whether the thing that protected you years ago is still helping you now. Again, was it protecting you before, and is it preventing you now? So instead of doing like signs you need therapy in a dramatic way, okay, because I could do a long list of dramatic signs you need therapy, we'll do another hot air emotional audit. I want everyone listening to just ask yourself a few of these very simple questions. Do I keep ending up in the same situation with different people? Do I apologize constantly? Do I feel guilty resting? Do I avoid difficult conversations? Do I struggle setting boundaries? Do I constantly need reassurance? Do I feel emotionally exhausted most of the time? Do I always put everyone else's needs before my own? Do I feel like I don't really know who I am outside of work, relationships, or other people? Do I keep telling myself this is just who I am? Question mark, question mark. Because that last one, I really want you to sit with because even as it came out of my mouth, I was like, "Ooh, this is heavy. This is just who I am." Because sometimes like it is in certain ways, but sometimes it isn't. You don't have to just be who you are, okay? Sometimes this is just who I am actually means I've been this way for so long that I stopped questioning it. But we can literally change anything we want about ourselves. And I think that is a very important difference. Therapy is not there to erase who you are. Therapy isn't there to make you less you. Therapy isn't there to turn you into some perfectly healed, enlightened human who drinks green juice and journals on a balcony at sunrise every morning. Again, that sounds fucking great. But therapy is there to help you understand yourself better. It's there to help you separate personality from pain, to help you separate authenticity from survival, to help you figure out what you're carrying that you don't actually need anymore. What I freaking love about therapy is, for example, I can say like to my therapist, Brian, which question mark, is he even my therapist anymore if he basically just broke up with me? But I could say to him, like, I don't like how I get this like physical feeling in my body when I start getting frustrated or angry when someone is misunderstanding me, right? Like I don't like that personality trait. But for a very long time I just said, well, that's just who I am. That's just me. I get heated, I explode when people are not understanding what I'm trying to communicate to them, right? So I could have just continued through life and been like, that's just who I am. And it is a part of who I am, but I don't love that personality trait of mine. So instead of him just being like, well, that's just who you are, you go to therapy. He helped me break down some situations in which I start feeling that way. He helped me notice that feeling before it became too heightened where I would explode. He helped me learn the different situations that would make those physical emotions and that anger kind of bubble up, and also why I would react that way, why I became so frustrated when people wouldn't understand me, because growing up as a gay kid, most people don't understand you and you're just like kind of begging to be heard. And so it's a whole thing, right? And then he gives me the tools to help that no longer be, this is just who I am. It will still be there a little bit. I am still Josh. I still get really frustrated sometimes, but that old version where I had that wall up that was protecting me, that would then hold all of these things in and I would explode, was no longer protecting me. It was preventing me from just feeling chill and communicating effectively. So for a long time, I did that thing where it was like, this is just who I am. I'm an angry person. I am mad. I go off. I pop the fuck off. But I didn't like that that was who I was. So therapy helped me change it. Like to me, I'm like, it's a no brainer. And like, okay, maybe the biggest misconception, which we've talked about this entire episode, is that, again, therapy is for broken people. It's not for broken people, right? I just like can't hammer that home enough. I'm not broken. I had to put a few things in different places, but I'm always broken. Therapy is for like people who are tired, right? People who are tired of blowing up and getting frustrated and pissed off. People who are tired of repeating the same cycles of getting frustrated and yelling at people and being pissed off. People that are tired of carrying around those old stories, like saying, this is just who I am. People that are tired of feeling stuck. People that are tired of pretending that they are okay. People that are tired of dragging around emotional baggage that wasn't meant to be carried forever. It was meant to be left behind at some point. Like everyone has something, okay? Literally everyone. There is nobody on the planet that doesn't have something that can use a little healing. And the difference is that some people unpack it and some people spend their whole lives dragging it behind them, calling it a personality, and it gets heavier and heavier as time moves on. And honestly, that sounds exhausting. We have way bigger fish to fry. Like, so maybe the question isn't like, do I need therapy? Do I? Maybe the better question might be, what am I carrying that I don't have to carry alone anymore? What can I bring to a therapist that they can help me carry? And then unpack and then let go of. And I feel like collectively, we just attended one giant therapy session, right? Except nobody had to fill out insurance forms and it was free. And yeah, free at the end of the hour. Now, if there is one thing that I hope that people take away from today's episode, it's that therapy isn't the scary thing reserved for people who are falling apart. Therapy isn't for, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, crazy people. It isn't about being broken. It isn't about some giant flashing sign that says that something's wrong with you. Therapy is really just about understanding yourself. It's learning where your patterns come from, recognizing the things that you've been carrying, figuring out which coping mechanisms still serve you and which ones don't, and giving yourself tools to navigate life a little bit easier. We talked a lot about how this works, especially within the queer community, like survival before we even learned emotional regulation, how some of the things that we call personality traits might actually be coping mechanisms. We talked about performance, people pleasing, vulnerability, why so many people judge therapy without ever stepping into a therapist's office. We talk about something that completely surprised me that therapy isn't necessarily meant to last forever and that growth doesn't mean never struggling again. We can always go back to therapy if we take a little break. Growth means understanding yourself enough to recognize when you need support and having the confidence to ask for it. And maybe my favorite takeaway from this entire episode is that everybody is carrying something. Literally everybody. The difference is that some people unpack it and some people drag it around. And this is also an episode that I hope that people will send to people that maybe have judged their therapy journey or people that are questioning whether they should go to therapy or not. Like I just said, we all have something. So everyone could use this episode. So feel free to share it with maybe friends or family that have been questioning therapy or have been going to therapy but aren't quite understanding it, or the ones that maybe judge your therapy journey and just don't get it and you're having a hard time explaining it to them. Send them the link. And as always, head on over to my Instagram and my TikTok at _hotairpod and give me a follow. Visit my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, to submit your listener stories, topic suggestions, and shop my merch. I forgot what I was going to say. Shop my merch. So take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Go get some therapy. Let down your guard. Remember, nobody is perfect and or healed and or put back together piece by piece. And I will see you next Tuesday. HOTAIR, hot takes therapy, no filter. Say what I mean. HOTAIR, let's be real. You're listening to Hot Air.